Hey, I've been asked to do an update video on the Thokk Weapon Master Gloves. I did a review of this when they first came out a couple of years back. People have rightly wondered, well, what's happened in the intervening couple of years? Do I still use them? How have I gone on with them? And sort of what's my current opinion of them? Well, to be honest, one of the reasons I haven't done an update video is my opinion hasn't really changed. This is the same pair, quite a bit more aged as I used for that review video. So it's still going strong. I use them for pretty much everything except for I don't use them for my cup hilt hand with rapier. If I'm doing rapier and dagger, I will use it for the dagger hand. I don't use them for small sword unless I'm doing small sword against some other weapon, in which case I will use them for small sword. They've gone from some pretty heavy use, right? Before I go into sort of show you sort of where they are now in terms of durability and damage and what's going on with them next, just to give you a flavor, I've used them in at least now, I haven't fully counted, at least probably 25 tournaments over that 2-year period. I think that's probably an underestimate. For basically every weapon, so I've used them in side sword tournaments and saber tournaments, rapier dagger, as I said, I use it for my dagger hand, mixed weapon nylon melee tournament, and of course open longsword. I'm going to show off a little bit, but also to give you a flavour for how how they've done. Right, here are the medals I've won in non-longsword events using these. At longsword events, right? So, I'm not talking about just using them in the pools and then whatever, I don't get out. Like, they've taken me all the way up to the finals. And in those 2 years, right, heavy use, as well as that, I use them for training, right? I train normally about 2 to 3 times a week. One of those training sessions, if I do it, is a pretty heavy sparring session, and sparring in both training as well as drilling in the regular sessions. As well as a bunch of non-tournament events like Dijon, like Fight Camp, where I do a hell of a lot of sparring with a bunch of different people, right? So through all of that, they have had very, very heavy use, many tournaments, many times I've been struck in the hands. Through all that time, I've had 0 injuries to the hand, right? Nothing, no injury at all. And I should have said at the start that I'm aware that this is my experience, and other people have had different experiences with them. I'm talking about what I've experienced with them. Right. The worst injuries I ever have using them, or the only things which ever cause concern, is strikes to the very tip fingertips, right? Strikes to the very tip fingertips that are poking out a little bit, yeah, coming straight down on top of that, do sting. And there's no denying that, like, they sting, you come away thinking, ooh, I felt that one. Every time I've had that, I've checked the finger out, and there's been not so much as a bruise, right? Okay, so while it does happen and it could sound like it's concerning, there has never been any damage from any kind of strike from that, right? I do, for longsword in particular, use the Thokk attachments, which I'll come back to. I wouldn't use them for longsword without the Thokk attachment, the extra longsword attachment. I just wouldn't do it. I use them without the attachment for all the other things where there's some kind of complex field. Because particularly kind of here, right, you have a gap in the hard protection, you still have the foam, inner foam, the viscoelastic foam inside. So as long as you've got some kind of complex hilt, I would use them with that. I use the Thokk attachments as well sometimes when I'm doing small sword against longsword, because the complex hilt on a small sword is pretty minimal. And you can still hold a small sword, by the way, pretty fine using that attachment. So by and large, they've done really well. Like, they are way more dexterous than other gloves I've used. In that same kind of period, when I had used Spez gloves, for instance, I did come away with injuries a lot more with Spez gloves, mostly on the thumb, but also in other places, in palms and things like that. When I had the conning gloves, I would be much more routinely coming away with bruised fingernails and that kind of stuff. Lost the thumb using the conning gloves in the last outing, actually, that I ever used them for. So in terms of their protection, they've stood up as well as the other gloves that I've used for any length of time. And while I'm going to go through the durability issues in a second, the other gloves I've had have all had sort of similar durability issues as well. Right, now the first thing you're going to notice, you probably already have noticed, is that there's a hell of a lot of hockey tape on this one. I don't go to a tournament without some hockey tape. That is particularly for the longsword attachment, which I'm afraid to say is the least durable component to it. As you can see, I've got flapping straps on this one. I'm kind of using this to the end of its life. Some of the plastic bits are kind of poking out in places. I do have other ones, but I like to use these up until they are definitely end of life, rather than cycle through the other ones. So if you are thinking about getting these, I would strongly encourage you to get a couple, at least one extra set of longsword attachments, right? Because they do have issues. Newer ones seem to have fewer issues, to be fair. We have lots of people in my club have bought these gloves and have had similar experiences to mine. So the newer longsword attachments don't have quite as many issues as the ones that I have, right? So hockey tape is fantastic for kind of quick fixes of things, and I use it all the time, not just for these, but for anything else that is kind of fabric related. My left one is slightly less damaged, right? This one's actually pretty much in good condition for a longsword attachment. There wasn't really anything wrong with the left one, but I have had left ones that I've had to retire, right? So this is a pretty kind of working order, taking a few hits, as you can see. I think this one is, no, this one's actually one of the oldest ones that I've got. You can tell by some of the changes he's made, particularly on the knuckles. But this has gone kind of perfectly fine, right? In terms of other durability issues with the gloves, you'll see that some of this has come away. It's not really a major issue, and you'll see that my thumb, for both of them, in fact, both of the thumbs have hockey tape on them, right? That's actually mostly because this part has eroded on the glove, right? So that's kind of worn through, and I've added the hockey tape to both stop that from getting worse. It hasn't fully worn through on mine, but I know it has on other people's. So when it started to wear through, I put the hockey tape on essentially to prevent that, right? And you could start by doing that. It doesn't really have any issues. And then there are a couple other places with hockey tape. I don't know how well you can see that one there and the fingertip here. Those are all micro tears. And by micro tears, the tear is probably smaller than 1 meter diameter. But I wanted maybe a bit more, maybe 2 millimeters, right? But certainly they're not big tears. But I wanted to prevent them from getting worse. So again, quick bit of hockey tape on top of it, covers the tear, stops it from kind of splitting, stops it from being a weak point. And then there are a few in the palm area here as well, kind of bits where it's worn through as well, which is not ideal. The wrist area too is another rubbing point right here. The plastic plate kind of poked through, and again I've covered it with hockey tape, which has kind of prevented that from getting worse. These are now, I would consider them to be not quite on their last legs, but I am going to retire them soon. My general retirement policy for HEMA equipment is that I retire it before it is dead, both because I don't want to be in a situation where I've got nothing to use while I'm waiting for the new equipment to arrive, because let's face it, HEMA equipment takes a while to arrive, and because I like to have a spare in case I do have a critical failure, and then I'm able to say, okay, fine, that's failed, but I've got some life left in my remaining equipment, as well as being able to lend it to people when required. I've got lots of students who don't necessarily have 100% of their kit before they start a tournament, and I want to be able to make sure I can give them some things to use for it, bits and pieces from my own stuff. So I am retiring them after, I said 2 years, actually, sorry, it's been 2.5, because it was February that I first used this pair within their first tournament for Wolf Call. So yeah, 2.5 years of use from February 22. What am I replacing them with? Another pair of Thokks. So I've ordered another pair of Thokks a few weeks back that will hopefully be arriving soon. I know that there's been a bunch of improvements that he's made to them versus the version I've got, because I've seen them in other people's gloves. He hasn't published a list of what those are. I hope he really should. But fundamentally, I'm sticking with Thokks. Right, I've found them to be they're certainly the most dexterous glove I've used, flat out, that has any kind of level of protection. More dexterous than a Red Dragon or anything like that, for if you're thinking about Saber or Sidesword or something like that. As well as more protective than a Red Dragon by a comfortable margin. And I found the protection sufficient. I've had no concerns in terms of my own hands with them. with, again, the longsword attachment for longsword. You definitely need it. I know it doesn't look nice. I know it's another breaking point. You need it for longsword. Just get it. Just get over it. Right. Now, having said that, there are a couple of things that I do to modify mine. One second. So the two things that I do to kind of augment the gloves that they're not particularly recommended by him, but I find make them much better. This is the inner glove that I've taken out. I really never take them out because I never bother switching them around. What you can see is I've added tape to the fingertips. Okay, there's some small tears on this one as well, but it doesn't. You don't really notice that when you're using them. Adding tape to the fingertips basically means that the hard caps stay with your finger. If you don't, because there's a bit of give in this one, then what happens is your finger goes first and the hard cap follows it later. Okay, so when you first get a pair of gloves, if you are looking at this and deciding to buy, I would recommend doing this before you do anything else. Tape to the fingers around the cap. I like hockey tape because there's not many much give in it, and it doesn't damage the fabric if you decide to take it off for whatever reason. So hockey tape's good for this, hockey stick tape. And then, as I say, the protection just kind of stays with it at that point. Right, so that's one thing I do add to it. The other thing I add to it, and I start doing this for everything, is I wear cycling gloves underneath. I actually started doing this because I've got injury here, long-standing injury that I'm trying to get padding for, but I've also got injury kind of here, and I've also had injuries here, in other gloves, I should say, not in the Thokk gloves, right? But the extra padding on this is both useful for my injury because it means I've got some padding covering the spot that gets hurt if I grip too much, but also pretty much everywhere that these cycling gloves have a bit of padding is somewhere that I've been injured using one good pair of gloves to another, and there isn't a lot of padding in the palms of the Thokks, right? No less than anything else, because like nor does a Spez glove, nor does a Conning glove, nor does pretty much any other glove I've ever seen. But in general, HEMA gloves have pretty limited padding. So I actually wear those cycling gloves for every other glove I use. If I'm using a light glove, I will still wear the cycling gloves underneath, because actually the injury I have here happened from a rapier when I was wearing light gloves. I was doing it left-handed, single rapier, and I caught a thrust to the palm, which has caused me numerous issues ever since. Okay, but apart from that, you know, I use the Thokk attachments. I use the regular Thokks. With the minor adjustments that I talked about, and have been for, as I say, 2.5 years, and I liked it enough that I've gone out and bought them again. So I will end this by saying other people have had different experiences. I know other people have had durability issues that are much more severe than the ones I've experienced. I know people have had breaks in the Thokks, but then again, I know people have had breaks in literally every single glove that I can think of. I know at least somebody who's broken something in them. It's not just me that is using them. They are now probably one of the more popular gloves, at least in my club, and certainly you know, I see them quite frequently in things like the Wessex League and Kit Check and all that kind of stuff. And it's not like they have a massive level of injury that other gloves don't have. But you know, be aware, buyer beware. No HEMA glove is perfect. No HEMA glove is perfectly safe. And this is my opinion and my experience, not some kind of rigorous testing. But I'll end that by saying, as I've already said, fundamentally, I'm happy with the gloves. Fundamentally, I will continue to use them for every weapon that I'm doing that they're appropriate to use it for, except for, as I say, you know, small sword versus small sword, or my rapier hand for rapier and dagger. Thanks for watching. Hope that was useful.